what we're going to do is in a moment we'll have an update from Ed McCann to give feedback from previous forums and an update on what GIRI is doing. And then we'll work through today's topic. We're going to have a look at an exercise to identify the different systems and procedures that are currently in use to prevent error. And we're then going to have a look at how effective these processes are. And we will compare how they differ between different sizes and types of organisation. And then at the end of that, we will explore the so what question. How can we make those processes better for our needs? And then hopefully Ed will be able to sum up and provide a bit of a explanation at the end. So if that's okay, if Ed, are you able to give a bit of an introduction, and I'll share your slides.
Yeah, I'll just unmute there. Yes. So can you hear me okay, Nick?
Great. Yeah, thanks.
Hello. So welcome, everybody. Great to see you all here again. So I'm just going to remind us why we're here and give you a brief update on the sort of GIRI program. So we're here because of this. 22% of all UK construction costs are in here. By the way, this is, the same story applies to our impact on carbon, because much of this is material that gets thrown in the bin that didn't need to be thrown in the bin. And one thing we're doing at the moment is recasting some of our literature and our sort of position for clients, in particular, to stress the linkage between the GIRI agenda and the sort of emerging carbon agenda. As clients become more interested in that, they need to understand that this is a key component in carbon reduction, is stop making mistakes. But on to the next one there, Nick. Remind ourselves, of course, that we see only a tiny fraction of the iceberg, and a lot of what lies beneath is where we really need to get to, and that's a big challenge for us all. The focus on root causes of error, and 6 of those top 10 being associated with planning and design, or rather inadequate planning and inadequate design. And next one. And to link again this sort of our sort of mission, as it were, to the sort of emerging story from Grenfell and the work that's been done on that by Dame Judith Hackett, who makes this statement, which is very strong. Do you want to go back a second, Nick? Just that any part of the sector who thinks they can survive by standing still or defending their current territory is sadly mistaken. For those who haven't seen it, there is an Institution of Civil Engineers piece of work called In Plain Sight, led by Peter Hansford, which is a sort of infrastructure on the sort of issues that have been, well, the issues that are associated with Grenfell. Dear.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can again now, Ed. You're back in.
Sorry, I don't know what happened there. And the strategic aim of GIRI to improve construction productivity and quality by eliminating error. Before we kick off into what Nick's going to be spending the day with you, I just thought I would update you. I mean, you'll have picked up the sad news, I'm sure by now, that Tom has passed. I went to his funeral last week, representing the GIRI community, and it was amazing to see the sort of positive impact that Tom had on sort of anyone who met him and the construction sector as a whole. And we're very determined in the sort of GIRI community to honour his memory by sort of really getting to grips with this program and this mission to sort of improve construction by getting rid of error. Of course, with his sad passing, we need to replace what he was doing, and so the board at the moment are working hard to do that, and you'll hear more about that in the next couple of weeks, couple of months as things develop. And I just thought I'd finally say that a key move recently is we've started working very hard to sort of maximise the benefit for GIRI and its community through relationship with major infrastructure clients. And I just came off a call this morning with the senior team at Sizewell, where we made a presentation to them, including their MD, on GIRI and what it's about and what it's trying to achieve. And we're hoping that some of these big infrastructure clients, or more of them, will take on board GIRI and embed it within their overall program. So that's ongoing with Network Rail, EDF, HS2 at the moment. These are areas where we're trying to get that embedded, and we're having some, I hope, good success there. And the other thing is to just note that we have, I think it's 3 new joiners this month, certainly 2, and I believe it's 3 new joiners coming through into the GIRI community. So with that little update, I'll hand over to Nick, who will do the honours, as it were, and I'll speak to you at the end.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Ed. Thanks. So I'm going to try and click some buttons in the background now and share a different screen with you. And what we're going to do is we are going to start having a look at the processes and procedures, systems and procedures that we have to avoid and prevent error within the construction industry. And the way we're going to do this is I'm going to ask all of you to basically use the chat box and just propose all of the different systems, processes and procedures that you think are relevant to preventing error. But I'm not going to ask you to do that just yet. So if you can just hang on a second. What we're going to do then is we're going to capture them on here. This is basically a massive blackboard or whiteboard, depending on which colour you make it. And what we're going to do is Helena, who's also on the line, is going to capture on Post-it notes what are the current systems and procedures that we use that play a part in preventing error. But we're going to do this for a number of different types of organisation. So we're not just going to do it generically. We're going to break down the sector. And the first area we're going to look at is very large principal contractors and joint ventures. So very large organisations will have a bit of a brain dump, collective brain dump. What are the processes they use? We'll then do it again, but this time for subcontractors. Brain dump, what are their processes? And we'll then go on and have a look at specialist suppliers, so smaller companies. We'll then do the same for quality professionals, so people who just focus on quality, and I know we've got a few on the call today. And then we'll have a look at design professionals, architects, designers and consultants. So if I come back up to the top of this board and we look at that first group, I will zoom in, and can you please use the chat box and just identify what are the principal procedures and systems that are used in those really, really big companies and joint ventures to prevent error. So their quality systems or their error prevention systems, any processes they've got. So please go for it in the chat box and we'll see what you all come up with. Okay, we've got ISO 9001 there, popping out straight away from David, thank you. Yeah, what else? What else have we got? Document control. So can you expand on that, please? Was that Clara that mentioned document control? Can you maybe unmute and just explain how that works?
Sorry, I couldn't find my mute button then.
Always tricky.
Just with regards to like process changes, you know, making sure that the teams have the right revisions, the revision copies, that they're available, so that you don't end up with hard copies and then new revisions on the system. Just processes like that really, and regular review of them, you know, in line with maybe regulation standards, and other sort of processes that incorporate into that.
Brilliant. Okay, and that is a particular bit of software or a particular package that is normally used for that particular organisation. So, okay, interesting. Thank you. We've got mentions of ITPs, inspection and test plans, audits, mandatory procedures, standard forms. So a variety of options there. Great, thank you. So we've got a bit of a dump and you can see they're being captured here on the screen. So let's go on and ask that same question again for subcontractors. So smaller organisations that are working nested within another organisation. So let's have another brain dump and see if there's anything new that comes in there. And if it's the same stuff, just put that in the box again. We're just trying to get a picture of what are these systems. Pre-inspection meetings. Can you expand on that, Ed? What do they look like? What do they feel like?
Yeah, thanks, Nick. For me, these are vital for success that involve subcontractor stakeholders, where it's almost like a go, no go, a clear review with contact from either from the design perspective, procurement with the counterparts from that organization, where there's a clear alignment on the requirements before the actual work is carried out. They are clear on the deliverables required. They are clear on the milestones. They are clear on costs. It's just so that we do not get any surprises. I look at it as measure twice, cut once.
Interesting. Okay, and that's really interesting, bearing in mind the forum we held 2 weeks ago, which was exploring the difference between reactive and proactive management of quality and avoidance of error. And you're focusing very much there on preactive or proactive before something goes wrong.
Correct.
And what else have we got? We've got certified material suppliers. We've got accreditation verification. Okay, interesting. So actually checking that it is an appropriate subcontractor and they're capable. Okay, thank you. We're filling those in. So let's now go on to the next group. So this is for very small, very specialist suppliers. So thinking of the supply chain, small companies that do a very specialist job. What do they use to ensure they're getting quality and they're avoiding error? Is it anything different? Is it the same stuff? Let's have another dump of thought into that chat box. It's quite a nice way just to get collective brains working together here. So we've got, oh, interesting. So David there, you said only use companies used previously. So David, can I ask you to comment on that, please?
Yeah, that was in relation to the previous one. Okay.
So that's interesting, though. So you're very much of the opinion that, go with someone you know and trust.
Yes, well, don't we all, whether it's at home or at work?
Yeah, interesting. I wonder, have we got any subcontractors on the line who'd maybe want to challenge that?
I'll challenge that, but I'm more on the client perspective. But I understand where Dave's coming from, but I'll challenge that because we need to be bold with some new innovations, and a lot of suppliers out there that might have a different vision. It might be different, but maybe it might be a way of doing something better, seeing it from a different perspective. However, obviously they need evidence of consistency with their work. But yeah, you can always do the trial and tested. The devil is better than the one you don't. So it's a very good. It's debatable.
Okay, interesting. So and
I'd just like to add, I didn't suggest it was my opinion.
No, that's fine. No, this is good. This is good.
That is the reality of the construction world.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, so let's focus then on what we're thinking about for small specialist suppliers. So maybe specialist types of equipment. We've got industry standards there from Bruce. Yeah, and I'm wondering about specialist components and things like that as well, where you've got elements, feedback. Okay, Carla, could you explain what you mean by that feedback?
Yeah, in some cases, when you use subcontractors, there are specific portals. I think Safe Contractor is one of them. Safe Contractor or Construction, where you go back in and you can actually provide feedback on the performance, and that allows the new tender provider to go in and assess their criteria in line with people's feedback.
Okay, really interesting. Right, so it's not just one way. You're closing off that communication loop. Okay, thank you. And then Paul, you've mentioned about bespoke systems. Can you maybe expand on that? That might prompt some other ideas.
I'm really just thinking that depending on what type of work it is, they'll have something to suit their works that just does everything that it needs to do for their purpose. To be honest.
Yeah, and I think that's the key, isn't it? They will be specialists. So it's and interestingly, that probably makes it very hard for someone else to check them. If they are the specialist, how do you check a specialist? So,
well, if they have the systems that they follow, then obviously you can audit that. But
yeah,
it's having the knowledge of that work to the depth required.
Great, thank you. Okay, and we've got lunch and learn training sessions, familiarisation with clients' handover processes. Could you maybe expand on that, please? Is it Zhao? Have I said your name right? I'm sorry.
Close enough. So it's pronounced João, but it's quite hard. I understand that. So my point there being, typically the clients have their handover processes, and they can be unfortunately quite complex, and this is to the benefit of everyone, including the principal contractor and anyone on their supply chain, to understand how it works in order to set the project for success, really.
Brilliant. Okay, thank you. So let's just go through these last two groups. So we've got, what about quality professionals? What systems and processes do quality professionals tend to use most of the time? Let's have a dump into that chat box again. We've got audits, yeah. Anything else that quality professionals are using? Inspection, document review, thanks David. 9K, 14K and 45K. Paul, could you just explain what that means, please, for the for those of us who are...
Well, ISO standards, 9001, 14001, 45001.
Okay, got it. Yeah, good. Thank you. Yeah, got it. KPIs, yeah. So you've got the key performance indicators. Thanks, Aid. I've got lots of mention there of formal systems by the sound of it. Yeah, everything in that list, interestingly, is very, very formal. So that sounds quite different to what we heard for the small suppliers and the specialist subcontractors. And then finally, for architects, designers and consultants. What eyes, David, thank you. Yeah, good one. Love it. So what about architects, designers and consultants? What do they use to ensure they're not making error? Let's have a look at that. Have a final dump of information into that box. Design reviews, okay, Cat 2 and Cat 3 checking, interesting. Could you just expand on that, Nigel, just for anyone who's not that familiar, please? And I see Steve has mentioned about checks as well, internal design reviews, training, document control systems, review RFIs, design coordination. Okay. So again, it sounds like it's a completely different bunch of documents, systems, procedures that are being used in the design side as are being used in the actual delivery side. So that's quite interesting. We've got a whole host of different stuff as we've worked our way through those different sides of groups. Yeah, and we've got Nigel there. Okay, sorry, didn't know your mic didn't work. So yeah, we've got category 2 and category 3 checking. So other people independently checking the design. Great. So what we've done so far is we have looked at this bunch of different types of organization, and we've come up with a host of procedures that they use. Now, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to ask a question. We're going to say, how effective are these procedures? And the way we're going to do that is that, if we imagine, this is just an example here, each of these little dots is a procedure that we've identified. And for each of those procedures, we're going to ask 2 questions. So the first question is, how good is this process in of itself? Is this process rigorous? Does it do everything it needs to do? And we can then just give that an approximate grade. So something that where the process is not very good at all, it doesn't have much rigor, we'd be low down. So maybe 1 or 2 out of 10. For a process that is completely rigorous and does everything, we put it somewhere up here. So that's our assessment of process. But then we're going to ask a second question. And the second question is, how well is it implemented? So that means, do people actually use it? Do they use it properly? Do they use it all the time? So we could find that there's a process that everyone uses all day, every day, and that would be up here at a 9 or 10 for process. But if there's some sort of system that people don't really use, is paid lip service to, or not everyone uses, then we're going to be back down here, maybe at 1, 2, or 3. So in a moment, what we're going to do is I'm going to invite you into this board so you can move the sticky notes around yourself. And then I want you, in your little groups that we're going to put you into, to work out where these should go on your chart. So we're going to end up with some sort of plot that shows how these different processes work. Now, before we start moving these sticky notes around, I need to invite you into this mural board. So I'll give a quick tutorial now as to what this is. So let me turn this notifications off so we don't get pinged all the way through. Sorry about that. So this is the board that you're going to get invited into when I send you a link. And what you can do is, if you've got a scrolly mouse, you can scroll in and out, and it just zooms in and out. Or down in this bottom corner here, there's a map, and that map shows you what you're looking at. And this little slider can zoom you in and out. So you can see how you get in and out. What you can also do is click this little hand, and then you can drag and move it around. Once you're in the place you want to be, so up in this top bit, you can unclick on the hand and you can just click on a post-it note, just click it once, and then you can type on there, hello. And I'm going to click on this one. And what it's asked me to do is put my name. So I'll put Nick. And then once I've typed it in there, what I'd like you all to do, please, is to just grab your name and stick it into this box where it says, yes, I can move the post-it notes. Okay. And that way we get a feel for who can move the post-it notes around. If you can't get them to work, don't worry, you'll be able to talk and you'll still be able to be involved. So let me delete that. Okay, and I will share this link in the chat box with you all. So this is a visitor link, copy the link, and I will now share this in the chat box. So here you go. So if you click on the link in the chat box now, you will magically appear into this mural board. So I'll stop sharing my screen because otherwise you'll get very confused because you're looking at the same thing twice. And I can see a whole bunch of you are appearing in that mural board. So please, if you can, I will drag you all so you're up at the top bit. There you go. Everyone's suddenly been dragged into the top bit. So if you can, please click on one of those post-its, just click on it once, type your name, and then you can drag your post-it into the box. Right, I can see some names appearing. Great, so we've got Mike, you're in there. Nigel, well done. Aid, great, good. Okay. I'll just give you another one. I'll set the timer going and I'll give you 1 minute just to finish off dragging your names in there and then we'll move on to the next bit. If anyone is having any problems, please just shout up and I might be able to help. Okay, I can't see much more movement, so we'll end the timer and move on to the next bit. So what I am, I'll just share my screen again to make sure you're all looking at the same thing as me. So what we're going to do now is, in a moment, you're going to be put into 5 separate groups, in breakout groups. And group 1 are going to look at this first question of the large principal contractors and joint ventures. So I'll just show you that. Group 2 will be looking at this second group, so the subcontractors. Group 3, obviously you're going to look at question 3, specialist suppliers. Group 4 will look at quality professionals, and Group 5 will look at architects, designers and consultants. So once you're in your breakout groups, please navigate to the appropriate part of this board, and then you'll be able to talk to everyone else in your group. And then you can just discuss where you think each of these elements should go on the plot in terms of, is the process good and is it applied well? So Helena, can I ask you please to put people in breakout groups now, and I will start this timer going, and we'll give you 8 minutes in your groups to look at those 5 different disciplines. So each group will look at one of the disciplines, and we'll see what you come up with. Hello, it looks like you all got the hang of that, so thank you for that. And I don't know how many of you were watching all of the post-its move around the screen, but I find it quite fascinating. Let me share my screen with you again. Here we go, I'll share that. So now, irrespective of what you're looking at, whether you're looking at Mural or you're looking at the board, the Webex, you should see the same as me. So you can see all of those different patterns. Now, what I think is really interesting with these is just having a look at what can we gather just by first glance at each of these plots. And what I think is fascinating is that we started off with joint ventures and really big organizations. And we see we've got a lot of processes. Some of them are quite fit for purpose and some of them are not. And none of them are really used that well. Then let's go down to the smaller companies, the specialist contractors and the specialist suppliers. We're saying, well, we've got a handful of procedures. None of them are that rigorous, but they're all used really, really well. And the interesting thing is that's what we see again and again throughout the industry, is when you start off with a small company or a young company, you start off with a handful of quite loose procedures that are actually used all the time. And gradually, as companies get bigger and bigger and merge, they start drifting up towards this top left-hand corner, where you have very big, complicated processes, but people stop using them. So this is fascinating for us because that gives us a challenge. So let me come back up to the little example sheet I was using. So this is my hypothetical world, a hypothetical company, and I'll just bring you in so you can see. So if we take any random process, so let's take this process here. We've got 2 options of how to improve it. We can either say we're going to improve the process itself. So that is making the process more and more rigorous. And that normally looks like adding lines into a spreadsheet, making your forms longer. But what we find is that as we make these processes more and more rigorous, they don't tend to just go up there. You tend to come back here somewhere because they become less and less user-friendly. So the other challenge we've got is how do we actually improve use of our processes and systems? And that's a very different thing and is sometimes at loggerheads with our desire to make our processes more rigorous. Because what we actually want is this net gain. So we've got to be very careful that by making our processes more rigorous, we're not undermining how well they're used. And the other thing we should definitely look out for is this bottom corner here. Any processes that we've got that are not really fit for purpose and nobody's using, we should probably immediately start thinking, can we get rid of this? Because we know the larger the numbers of processes we've got, the less engaged people will be with every one of them, because there's only a limited pool of people to take on this work. So what I'd like to do is to ask you another question down here. And you can answer this question. You can either come down on Mural and write your answers on the post-it. Or if you prefer, you can also write it in the chat box, and Helena will magically scribe it onto Mural for you. But the first question is, what have you ever observed as companies have tried to improve quality? What has been the consequence? What has that felt like as companies have tried to improve quality? So please just add your comments in there or in the chat box. So Carla, I see you've mentioned resistance. Can you explain that? What does that feel like? What's your example?
Yeah, I think if you're trying to implement new processes and procedures, not everybody's fully on board with that. So some part of the team will do it and some won't. That therefore makes the whole process ineffective. And especially perhaps where audit's concerned, you get resistance from people wanting to take part with audits because they perhaps feel that they'll be penalised or, perhaps under pressure and have to display things they haven't got when the process is actually trying to improve and identify weaknesses, but it can be taken the wrong way. So a lot of buy-in to audits and things like that don't always happen.
Okay, interesting. Okay, so you get a lot of resistance and people think it is a punitive thing. Great, thank you. Has anyone else got an example of that where they've had resistance, pushback when they've tried to implement procedures to prevent error? Shout out if you've got an example or if that rings true.
Oh yeah, definitely. Because you're dealing with human beings, and human beings don't like being told to do their job differently. Don't being told what they've been doing historically as wrong, even if they haven't had any problems with it. And my clients haven't had any problems, and my boss has never had a problem. It's never been mentioned in my appraisal, etc., etc. Because all change is challenging for people. So I think there's definitely human factors issue in there.
That's really interesting because actually and you've got this sort of clash here, haven't you? So from a quality professional perspective, this is objective. This is not about a person, but the way it's received by the person receiving that information, they feel it as a criticism of them as a person. So really interesting. Thank you for that. And Bruce, you've mentioned about confusion. Could you maybe expand on that?
I think that's basically but generally.
Oh, you're very quiet, Bruce. I don't know if you're able to. Okay, don't worry, Bruce, but we definitely get your message about confusion, so thanks for that. Okay, and I can see on the Mural board we've got, haven't priced for that. Downsizing the number of procedures, interesting. Balance of reward, outweighing the effort. Okay, yeah, so actually it's always a balance of how much time and effort do we spend on preventing an error, and is it easier just to ignore it and plow on? Okay, so that leads on to the final question, which is, so what? So reflecting on what we've just had a look at in terms of how procedures fit within a company organization, how people respond to feeling like they're criticized, what would you recommend now? So how could you improve your systems and procedures for preventing error? Any recommendations? So either throw them in the chat box or stick them on a sticky note, and I'll be interested to see what you've come up with. So Carla, again, they're learning tools. What do you mean by those learning tools?
Well, for example, in EKFB, I think they're very proactive at carrying out bite-sized learnings so that we can understand about each other's departments, the functions, the importance of what we're doing, a bit of background as to why that's happening, and the sort of impacts if they're not followed. So I always think that sort of thing goes a long way to helping people to understand why they're doing it rather than just carrying out an exercise that doesn't mean a lot to them. When they can see the background, then they have more, they buy into it a little bit more.
Interesting. And I was interested there that you used the word why. Why am I doing this? And I think it's something so powerful there.
Yeah, when it causes additional work, or perhaps even the way the bite sizes or the learning is issued. Not everybody is great on Teams and IT, so that can be off-putting for some people. So lots of factors like that can stop a bit of buy-in from any of the processes.
Brilliant. Okay, thank you. And David, I've seen you put about fewer and shorter procedures and fuller and clearer forms. Can you expand on that, or maybe give an example of where you've seen that in action?
Yeah, I think it's really important that the management systems serve the end users and not the other way around. So a good example would be a 10-page procedure with a 1-page form. The 10-page procedure is saying, and I've seen this, it's saying what needs to go in the form, only the form is just an outline shell with no real leads and content in it. Much better to have a 1-page procedure with a form where a lot of the thought and thinking is being done so that somebody can fill it in quickly and efficiently without having to wade through a procedure and do a whole load of independent thinking on the side.
Interesting. Great. Thank you. Has anyone else got an example of where they've seen either good or bad examples of that, where you've got procedures that either have been considerate to the users or inconsiderate?
A few, I'll go back 10 years ago, one of the big nuclear power stations companies asked me to write their temporary works procedures for the construction that was about to occur in the next 10 years. And I did the best bit of work. This document was fabulous. It was really great. I went and saw several other people, got their input. Now I thought this is going to be really useful. Then I sat down with the quality manager. He said, I need it on 1 page. I need an input. And there was so much I learned from that, in that I had this 20-page document with appendices and guidance and all this kind of stuff in it. But it taught me that there is a place for that, but it isn't actually in the procedure. The procedure was to make it simple to people, what you've got to take, what direction you go, what the output, and when this should be used, And I thought that was such a powerful learning.
Brilliant. Thank you. That's fascinating. And it sounds like what you had done is drifted right up into that top left corner. The perfect procedure, but no one was going to use it.
Exactly right.
Yeah, really powerful.
And as a result of that learning, everything I write now is simple,
That's great. Okay, and let's have a look at what we've got on the mural board. So we've got get staff to buy into that change journey. Okay, that's interesting. So that seems to come back to the idea of why. Technology, ERP. I'm not. Oh, I'll have to protect. So can someone expand on that? Who wrote the technology ERP bit? Can you expand on that, please?
Yeah, I did, Nick. It's Phil Thompson. Yeah. Similar to the other comments that have been made, just the use of technology, ERP's enterprise resource planning system. So an actual built-in process that follows a map, so that it has gateways, so the user can't proceed to the next stage until they've effectively completed a process.
Okay, so you're not giving them the options to get it wrong in a way. It sounds like the old plug in the socket type scenario where. Great. Okay, thank you. Look to actively reduce the number of procedures. Yeah, that's really powerful. Simpler, ask workforce who would like to be involved in improving the system. Okay. Who wrote that one, please? Asking.
That's me again. Sorry. Typically one of the reluctances to use new systems is because they haven't asked me, that I know more about this than the person who wrote it, etc. We did this 30 years ago. We've made that mistake, all that kind of stuff. So I tend to find you get better systems if you get the people who know most about it and who are going to be using them to write them. Okay, we might want to steer them, might want to edit, might want to bring some other people, but if you actually get the people who are going to do the tasks in the writing, you generally get a better outcome.
Yeah, great. Has anyone got experience of engaging the workforce and the end users in creating their systems? Has anyone ever done that they can talk about how that worked? I can see you're nodding there, Phil.
Yes, I've got some experience when I had a lean role, and it is very challenging because there's a lot of cultural barriers there. But I think what's lacking principally is the top-down leadership. Unless approach to quality becomes like safety is in the construction sector, then it's always going to be challenging to adopt efficiencies.
Okay, yeah. So getting that buy-in is it sounds like it's hard work. Anyone else any thoughts on that? How you actually engage with the workforce, with the end users?
Yeah, I mirror what Phil is saying as well. It's almost like before we get this rigorous change or wave of change for quality, it needs to be on the same platform for environmental 45 for health and safety 45 or environment 14. those are the other two that if you get it wrong, you have to face the potential of a hefty fine or go into jail. Quality does not say, I'm not saying that it needs to be on that realm, but until it's on something on a similar path, people will not take quality as serious as that. I think one of the aspects is error-free ratio is one of the implementations we're looking at getting institutionalized within the next year or so. So once we get onto that platform, mirror that with ISO 9001 requirements, we've still got a bit to go.
Great. Okay, thanks, Ed. So it's interesting there that we've started drifting here into the idea of cultural change. And actually we're saying that unless our culture is right towards avoiding error, it's going to be an uphill struggle trying to get people to buy in. So we've had mention of why. People have to understand why something is important. We've talked about cultural change, and we talked about focusing on the needs of the user, the person who is completing the form. And use a targeted team. Okay, thanks, Carla. So could you expand on that?
Yeah, so for example, if you were writing lifting processes, then you would gather the team that are involved directly in that process, ask them to talk you through exactly what happens, how they think it can be improved, and really use their inputs and walk through the processes in a small targeted team. I think that could be quite effective as well, rather than involving too many people. And then once you've got the bases together, then you can start presenting it to others, or perhaps to external parties to check that everything is correct. I think you have to start with a targeted team first.
Okay, yeah. So asking the right people is clearly going to be the key to getting the input you need. And also, you're not asking too many people, so you're not taking up their valuable time and just adding to, I presume, what they're having to do already. Brilliant. Well, thank you for that. That was really interesting, and hopefully it gave a bit of a reflection on what we can do and what's good and what's not so good to do. So before we wrap up, or whilst we're wrapping up, could I ask you, please, if you can provide any feedback on this workshop in Mural? What you can do is if you just double click in the box, a post-it note will appear. And you can say what you think of this workshop, and crucially, anything that you think would make workshops like this better in the future. And that will just allow us to keep improving the support we can offer to you all. So I'll leave that running in the background. I'll stop sharing this screen now, but if you keep writing in there your feedback, that would be great. And I will wrap up. I think we've lost Ed, so unfortunately you're stuck with me for the wrap up. But as I was saying, I think the really interesting things we found there was that what our tendency is to create really, really complicated, detailed processes. And we can get sucked into thinking that processes are the key to preventing error. But what it sounds like came out there through conversation is actually we need to think about people and being sympathetic to the needs of people, and actually reducing our process can promote engagement. And what came through again was if people understand why something's important, then that might be one of the key tools and even more powerful than an excellent process. So I will wrap up now, and I will just share details of the next forum we've got coming up. So this is on the 23rd of November at 1:30, and we're going to have a guest speaker, Helen Sulu, whom she is head of quality management at Heathrow Airport, so clearly has a wealth of expertise to share, and she's going to focus on how we learn from errors. We've got 2 minutes left, so I'll wrap up, give you all 2 minutes of your time back. Say thank you very much. If anyone has any final comments, please shout out, and if not, I will wave goodbye and look forward to working with you all again very soon. Thank you very much.